Yes, hello. This is Sharon with Force of One, and tonight's wonderful speaker for our open broadcast is Miss Sheila Ashley. She is a pastor. She's an advocate for domestic violence, sexual assault, and mental health awareness. With over 20 years of experience, she works diligently in the community and abroad to empower people to live their best life. She is also known as a transformational life coach known as the Cleanup Woman, and is quickly becoming one of the most sought-after keynote speakers and coaches around. She is a national and international speaker and conference host. So none other than Ms. Sheila Ashley speaking on the importance of being an advocate for your child, the difference between an IED and a 504 plan. Go, Ms. Ashley.
All right. Hey, everybody. How are you doing this wonderful and amazing Monday night? As Uncle Frank has said, I am Sheila Ashley, also known as the Cleanup Woman, and I will be your next favorite. If you have not already met me, I will be your next favorite transformational coach. My job is to take you from your stuck place to your next place to your ultimate best place. I want to thank Uncle Frank tonight for this great opportunity to serve tonight on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, especially with having a child of my own who was diagnosed at age 8 years old with bipolar and schizophrenia, and I had to fight hard to get that diagnosis. She should have been diagnosed long before then, but back in the early 90s, they were not diagnosing children with mental health issues at the time. And so she kept continuing to have symptoms that was very harmful to our family, and in school she was excelling academically, but for her behavior was not quite where it needed to be at. And I kept going out to the school kept calling me, and I couldn't get them to assist me. I was a single mother, and I needed help, and I just was not getting the help. I decided, by the Lord giving me the different instructions of what to do, I went and hired a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a psychotherapist, and I took her independently for 3 years before I ever applied for disability. I went backward and forward, and I finally found a program at the University of South Florida that I was able to become certified as an advocate for families with disability and special needs. And the reason why I decided to seek that certification is to be the best advocate for my child. Since the school was not educated at that time, counselors were not educated at that time, who was the best person to be the voice for my daughter other than myself? And I didn't even quite understand it because for those of you that are not African American on the line, I grew up in an African American household. And when my daughter was acting out, my mother was saying beat her. And, my mother was saying beat her. The schools were saying don't touch her. And the medical professionals were saying you better not touch her. And social worker was saying you're going to jail if you touch her. So it was a whole variety of opinions and experts of saying what I should and shouldn't do. But then I had this child that was acting crazy, and I had, 3 other children who was afraid to go to sleep in the house at night. And then as a mother, I was compassionate because that's still my child, and I know that there's something going on that's out of the norm. So I needed to figure out what was the best method to do in order to help my daughter to live her best possible life with the diagnosis that she had. And I began to educate myself, and as I educated myself, I began to go out to the school and sit with the counselors and begin to educate them on how to help me help my daughter, how they needed to be able to be a part of my daughter's village in order to help me reach her so that they can reach her at school while I'm reaching her at home. And I stayed out there to the school system. I joined the PTO. In Florida, we had PTO. Some of the places here in Georgia have PTA. But I joined the PTO, became the PTO president, so that I can be, a part of the school. I went and I sat in my daughter's classroom. I became a part of the school unofficially, as a staff member. I volunteered where I could because I wanted to make sure that I was on the scene, and that they understood that I was not this parent that was just throwing this child with what society called it as a dysfunctional child off on them. I needed them to understand that I was a parent, concerned parent, an active parent, and a parent that needed them to come on board as a tribal member of my daughter's village. And so that is how all of that came about, and I've been doing this work ever since then. And the gift, and I call it the gift that keeps on giving, although it may have looked like a burden at the time because I was a single mother, but it was one of the best gifts that God could have ever given me, because if my daughter had not had bipolar schizophrenia diagnosis, I would have never became an advocate to become educated enough to be a gift in other people's lives. And so I work in the school system here locally, not officially as a representative for the school, but I'm an independent advocate. And parents call me whenever they have a problem in the school system. And 9 times out of 10, when parents call me and say that their child got suspended excessively, and more than not, it's usually black males that are getting suspended out of the school system with excessive suspensions, 10 and 14 and 15 days out of school excessively, where, another student wouldn't have gotten those many days. And when a parent called me, first thing I ask, okay, I need to sit down. I need to be able to come in your home. I need to do a home eval with the parent or parents in the home. More than not, there's a single parent home, so that male has only one role model in that home. He has the mother, we women, we do what we can do, and we roll up our sleeves and do what we have to do, even when we don't want to do it, and even when we don't know how to do it. But if a male has issues that is going on inside of him that he does not understand, and he doesn't have a village of other men in his life, then that leaves a woman to try to fill that role. And not saying that she can't do the best of her ability, but that leaves her without the tribe being able to be a part of the village to assist. So I go in those homes and I sit down and I talk to the mother or the father or both parents and that student, and I sit there and I assess everything that's going on. And 9 times out of 10, there is some mental health issues going on somewhere. And if it's not mental health, then there's some dysfunction in the home, and that's another conversation for another day. But 9 times out of 10, there is some mental health some mental health disorders that are going on in that home. And the parents, we as a black community, those of you that are on the call that are of African descendancy, that we've grown up. Most of us didn't grow up like the Huxtables. We were more like the Evans. You get that belt out and you tear that butt up, and you spare the rod, sport a child. So we were taught to discipline the children, and a lot of us are using the wrong methods with the wrong child. What you may be able to do with one of your children, you may not be able to do that with all of your children. So you've got to learn that maybe little Mikey is just not being bad. Maybe little Mikey has something going on, a chemical imbalance of the brain that is causing him to be off. Maybe little Mikey has, autism, where when he's, having those nerve sensations are going all through his skin like electricity, and it's causing him to act out, and he does not know how to articulate it. And we don't understand the reason why, little Mikey's banging his head against the wall, or, we say, oh, you crazy just like your daddy. We need to get to the root of it. And so more than likely, I ask the parents permission to get them to notarize a paper if they're working and they can't get off from work, to notarize a piece of paper saying that I can go out to their son or daughter's school, sit with the counselor, the principal, and a team of people to find out, can we get a diagnosis if there isn't a diagnosis? More than likely, I try to encourage the parents to go ahead and get a private independent test done through a psychiatrist first, a psychologist or a psychotherapist, so that they can go ahead and get that ball rolling, because sometimes you can get a more conclusive test independently done than you can through the school system, because the school system has so many students, and sometimes it takes so long for them to get to those students to get the different tests that they need done. So if you have an independent, doctor or medical professionals that are already testing and already getting the ball rolling, then you're already ahead of the game. But if not, I get in there and I sit down with the counselors. I'm 9 times out of 10, meet with the principal first and say, hey, let's find out what happened. Why was this student suspended? And, was it necessary for this student to be suspended X amount of days? And let's just look to see what the handbook says about how many days this student was suspended. Because a lot of times, if you have an IEP or a 504 plan, most parents don't know that there are certain limits to how many days a student can be, how many consecutive days a student can be suspended for without consequences, in the school system. So we have to know our rights. So I want to explain to those of you that may not know the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan today. And you might say, well, what is the importance and why do I need these things? You need to be able to advocate on the behalf of your children. And the reason why I'm a strong believer that we should have an IEP or a 504 plan in our children's school folders or school records if they have a disability is for a safety net, especially for minorities, whether you're African American, whether you're Hispanic, or whether you are, whatever your minority situation is. I can't say enough the importance of you having an IEP or a 504 plan in your child's school's record if you know for a fact that your child have a disability of some sort or another, especially behavior disability, because it may come back and bite you later on if you don't have those things in place. For instance, if your child does have a disability and it's a behavioral disability and they don't have a 504 plan in place, and even if they have a 504 plan in place, I'm going to tell you a little bit about having a 504 plan and not having the correct information in there, how that can be just as bad as not even having one. But if your child has behavioral problems and they don't have a 504 plan, then if their actions are bad enough, that school don't have to have mercy on them. They don't have to have compassion for them. They can legally press charges, or they can be excessive with, whatever penalties that they choose to impute upon that student. But if that child has a 504 plan, they have to follow certain guidelines according to that 504 plan. If that 504 plan does not have certain wordings in it and it does not stipulate the needs of your child and the disabilities that your child have in an escalated situation, that's even more dangerous because it still puts your child at a risk, at a legal risk. So it's just as important as just having a 504 plan and having the right 504 plan. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But I just want to give you a quick, and I'm not going to be really, really lengthy in giving you all of the legal terms and all of those things because I don't want to overwhelm you with information because it can become very overwhelming. Like I said, I've been doing this 20-plus years. and it still becomes overwhelming sometimes. Every meeting I go in, I always go ahead of time a few days just to get the ideal situation so that I can go and do my study, so that I can cross-reference, pick up the phone and call certain attorneys and say, hey, this is the situation. This is what I've researched. This is what IEP plan or IEP or 504 plan that I've came up with. Do you see anything that I missed or anything like that? So even after 20-plus years, I still cross-reference with, colleagues that are professionals in the legal field to make sure that it's right. But what is an IEP? An IEP is governed by special education law. So you may have heard the term IDEA, a federal law called the Individuals with Disability Education Act requires the public school create an IEP for every child receiving special education services. Kids from ages 3 through high school graduation or a maximum age of 22, whichever comes first, may be eligible for an IEP. An IEP is meant to address each child's unique learning issues and include specific educational goals. It is legally binding document. The school must provide everything that it promises in the IEP. Here's the problem. A lot of families don't know to go to their kids' school and ask for an IEP or a 504. And if you don't know to ask for an IEP, you're 9 times out of 10, if you even show some concerns that you feel that your child may have a disability, they're 9 times out of 10 aren't going to give you the IEP. They're going to settle to give you a 504, and that's only if you're persistent. And let me just backtrack. There are some schools and some counselors and principals who really do care and will, say, hey, we agree. Let's get Mikey the best system set up so that we can all help each other help Mikey. But for the majority part of it, more than likely you will walk away with a 504 plan. You have to have, in order to get an IEP, individuals with disabilities have to have at least one or more of 13 different conditions. One of the first, one of them is SLD. You've heard that term, specific learning disabilities. That can be a plethora of things: dyslexia, auditory processing disorder, nonverbal learning disability. That one category right there could be a plethora of disabilities. Then they can have other health impairments. Some of the things that fall under the umbrella of other health impairments are things like the term ADHD. We've all heard of ADHD, or most of us have heard of ADHD. And even in the black community, we joke about it when we see a child that can't sit down, like, oh, that boy just got ADHD or, ADD. We joke about it, but that's nothing to laugh about, because that child could really have a disability. The other one is, it used to be called Asperger's, and now they're more leaning towards calling it autism spectrum disorder. And that's one of the ones that would qualify you for IEP, or emotional disturbances. So that's something like anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression. They can have speech or language impairment. So that qualifies them for an IEP. So, and I want to encourage parents, if you know that your child's speech is a little bit off at age 3, do not let them tell you to wait to first grade, second grade, if they'll catch up on it. The earlier you can get them speech therapy and get them lined up with a speech pathologist, the better chances you have of them beating that more quickly than not. And children who have speech impediment or language impairments sometimes have low self-esteem. And so if you can get the school to understand your concern about your child having speech or language impairment, please do not back down. When my grandbaby was at that age, I was adamant. No, I need help. And because, we're blessed enough to have insurance that I don't need a referral, we were able to take, our grandchildren to a private speech pathology office, and so we were able to get that. And had we waited on the school, my granddaughter is 9 years old now, getting ready to turn 10. That was ever since she was in pre-K. She has not gotten that evaluation through the public school yet. So, if you have the privilege of having private insurance, I admonish you to go, through your private insurance. Yes, you may have to pay the copay, but it's tomatoes, which or it's like Jiffy or Peter Pan. Which is your preference? Would you like the free services and wait through the school system, or will you sacrifice? And sometimes it was a great sacrifice to us because our granddaughter had to go to speech pathology twice a week, not to mention the other different specialty doctors that she was going to throughout the week, copays. So we were spending like $150-something a week on just copays. Could we afford to do it? No, not at that time. We couldn't, but it was a sacrifice we made, and I'm glad that we did because, like I said, she's getting ready to be 10 in January, and she still has not been called up, for that evaluation. But now, on the flip side to that, if we didn't have that, private insurance, I would have made sure that I hung in there and nagged them until she got in that evaluation. So I want to encourage you all. Speech and language impairment is very important. It's not a laughing matter. If your child is stuttering or they're saying words that are not right, lose, they're trying to say shoes and they're saying lose, and you laugh, and that's not funny because you're not helping their self-esteem. Children are already going to be cruel to them when they get to school, so don't make it hard for them at home. Visual impairment, including blindness, that's also one of those 13s that they can get an IEP for. Deafness, that's also one of the 13s. Hearing impairment, deaf blindness. Those, and I know it sounds like it's the same, but falls in different categories. Orthopedic impairment, children with like cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities like Down syndrome, traumatic brain injury, those that were caused by maybe been in a car accident or some kind of blunt force object or something. And then there's the one that falls in called multiple disabilities. That's where you got a plethora of things going on, where you may have one or more of those 13 that gives you the access to be able to qualify for an IEP. So most parents think that just because their child have a disability that they automatically can qualify for an IEP, but that's not true. They have to fall under those 13 conditions that are covered that qualifies them for an IEP. So once again, I'm sorry, were you getting ready to say something, Uncle Frank? Okay. So once again, an IEP is governed by a special education law. So if we're going to talk about
where are you in the car?
We're going to talk about a 504. The 504 is governed under a civil rights law. So, the 504, this is what makes the difference in what kinds of services and how an IEP and a 504 plan comes together. So if your child does not fall up underneath those 13 conditions that was covered under the IEP, then that means your child is going to fall up underneath receiving a 504. The 504 is, it's not, it's people say, well, which is the best, and which is, which one would you choose? You have to abide by the law. The law will give you the IEP under those 13. But if you can't get, under the IEP under those 13, then you get the 504. And the 504, this is a part of a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against public school students with disability. That includes students with learning and attention issues who meet certain criteria. The thing with the 504 plan, these are students who doesn't necessarily need to be pulled out and put in a special ed class. These are kids that can still function in a regular classroom, and they may or may not, need to be pulled out some parts of the day for certain classes, or they may be able to just need some adjustments in their classroom. So that's why I say it's really, really important that you understand what is needed in your IEP or your 504 plan. Many people say, well, do I need an attorney for that? I would say, yes and no. If you don't know the language, then you definitely need to get an advocate to go in with you. Or those of you that are in Atlanta, I know Uncle Frank is in Atlanta. Those of you that are in Atlanta, there is an amazing organization called GeorgiaAppleseed.org. It's GAPPLESEED.org. They have attorneys who volunteer, and they come on and they will assist you. Their website is amazing. You can learn, to teach yourself the skills that you need within itself on their website. Their website is like liquid gold to anybody who has a child that has a disability or special need. So get familiar with GeorgiaAppleseed.org. But if you have questions, they are very patient and understanding. I have called them in crunch time right before going to a tribunal hearing. If you ever get to a tribunal hearing, then that meant the other steps that you took really, really didn't work, and you really need some justice. But I have called them right before I've headed to a tribunal hearing and have asked them questions, and they have stayed on the phone, answered all of the questions that I needed. They have called back to see how, things went and to see if they had any attorneys in the area that, could show up with me or for me or for that family. So for those of you that are in the Atlanta area, I would definitely encourage you to get in touch with GeorgiaAppleseed.org. But for hiring an attorney, I would only say hire an attorney if you feel that your civil rights on your 504 plan your child's civil rights have been infringed upon, or if you feel that your child's IEP plan has not been implemented, or injustice have been taken place. They have excessively disciplined your child beyond what is required, what they're allowed to do. So the reason why you need to be able to advocate for your child is, first of all, that's your child. Second of all, if your child is acting out in school, and these are teachers and not parents to your child, what makes you think that they're going to have compassion to deal with something that they don't yet understand or even have the knowledge of it? So it's important to sit down and meet with the counselors and the different teachers that are a part of your child's education every day. Some of the things I want to give you, the don'ts before you have a meeting for an IEP or a 504 plan. Don't go in there in your house shoes. I know everybody's walking around now with these slides with the fur on them. That's fine for home. And if you choose to run to the local grocery store with those on, that's fine if you choose to do that. But if you're going out there to represent your child at your child's school, you don't want to go in your bedroom shoes. You don't want to go out there with your head scarf on. You don't want to go out there looking like you're on your way, to the nightclub or you want to go presenting yourself. You want to look like you're going because you mean business. You want to go presenting yourself to be taken serious. You don't want them to look at you because, I'm in the school system. I'm there. I hear the talks. I hear the conversations. You don't want to go in there. And unfortunately, we are in a world where we stereotype people. We are in a world, men, if you're going, and I want to commend all of the men that go out to their children's school and participate in conference meetings, participate in when their sons are getting in trouble in school and they're sitting in the office with the principals trying to figure out something. I want to commend you all. I thank you for what you're doing. You are, leading the village of your child. So I thank you for that. But you don't want to go out there with your pants hanging down your waist, with your underwear showing and your belt all the way down there to your ankle, and you walking holding your pants. Who's going to really take you serious? They're going to say your child acting out at home because there's some dysfunction at home. And that may not be the case. You may just like being styled that way, but that's the way you will be judged. That's the way you will be stereotyped. And so in order to kill it, I understand that we all have a freedom to dress the way we want to dress, to look the way we want to look. I understand that. I get it. But when you're going out there to take care of business for your children, you want to look like you're taking care of business so that you can be taken serious. First things first, if you know that you have a scheduled meeting, a day or two before that meeting, you want to make sure that you call the school, get the name of the person that you talk to, call the counselor. If you don't talk to the counselor, talk to the principal. If you don't talk to the principal, you talk to someone that can tell you, that can confirm your appointment, date, and time. You want to write all of that information down, who you talk to, what time you talk to them. If you have access to your child's teacher, you want to make sure that you confirm all of that with the teacher as well. You want to ask questions, is there any information that you need me to bring with me? Is there anything you need me to know beforehand? Because sometimes we'll get in a meeting and we forget what we were intending to ask. So write down those questions that you may have. I encourage you to make sure that you bring your children's, if you know that your child is not academically excelling the way you would like them to excel, or you know that they've had some behavioral problems, I encourage you to bring past report cards. I encourage you to bring medical documentation where there's a diagnosis. I encourage you to get referrals from, if your child attends Sunday school, get the Sunday school leader, to just give a behavioral reference. Well, little Mikey, he's a great kid, but, we have to keep redirecting him, or I have to kind of keep little Mikey sitting next to me, but he's great kid, something. You want to get a behavioral reference so that you can take that in there with you. Any medical documentation, you want to sit down and carefully think of questions that you want to ask. You want to ask any question that you need to know going into that meeting so that you don't leave out of there with any questions. You want to hold those people in that meeting accountable. You do not want to be late. You want to be early. Better you waiting on them than them waiting on you. Because if you're waiting on them, that makes them look bad. That makes them look like they're dropping the ball. But if you're late, that makes it look like that there's, once again, some form of dysfunctionality going on in the house, and that's the reason why that child is acting out, and that may not be the case at all. So, and if you are running late, be accountable. Call. Don't call 1 minute before you're supposed to be there. Call as earliest as you know that you're going to be late, because believe it or not, a lot goes into the planning process of having it should be if the school is doing it correctly. There's a lot go into the process of doing a IEP or 504 plan meeting. So behind the scene, there are a lot of people that got to get together and discuss, what one person is doing and what the other person is doing and what do they need to do. The counselor has to do her or his job and find out what needs to be implemented, what should be discussed. The principal need to be in the loop. Everybody need to be in the loop. What time, where they need to be at. So if you're running late and you call them a minute before, and that teacher has already been there 6, 7 o'clock that morning, and now it's 4:30, and you were supposed to be there at 4 o'clock. You just hindered a whole staff from doing other things. So you don't want to be the one late. You'd rather them be late than you. You want to make sure that you don't go in there cursing. If they're late, don't go in there using profanity. Don't go in there acting obscene. You can get your point across without being loud and belligerent. You don't have to go in there, just acting crazy. Just let them know, I have a scheduled appointment. You don't have to roll your eyes. You don't have to huff. You don't have to even fold your arms. You don't have to pace across the secretary's desk walkway. Just sit there patiently, because believe you me, there is someone documenting your behavior. Even though they're late, there is someone documenting your behavior, and it will come up again. Whether it comes up in that IEP or that 504 meeting or not, it will come up with a social worker or someone down the line. So you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best light and in the best image possible. You want to be prepared with all of the proper, paperwork, documents, report cards, behavior letters, your personal logs of communication. If you've been keeping in touch with the teacher or the counselor, you want to make sure you have all of your records on tap. Have them organized. Have your stuff organized. I like to get one of those accordion binders so that I can, compartmentalize my different documents and then put the little tabs on them so that I can say, okay, this is, medical documentation. Okay, these are at-home behavioral meltdown documents. Journal. Every conversation, every call that you have with whomever. Doctors, believe it or not, doctors will save their butt. They will allow you, if there is a social case, a case come up against you, you know what? All the nice accolades sometimes go out of the window. There are some doctors who say, no, not that parent. I've never had a problem with them. They've always been to their doctor's appointment. But then some of them get paid out by the state because they know that they're going to lose their contract. So you want to make sure that you keep a good journal documenting every single conversation that you can possibly have with whomever. You want to look. You want to get referrals. You want to find a neuropsychologist who understands children's brains. If you have a child that's acting out, you don't want to go to somebody that doesn't understand children's brains. You don't want somebody that understands an adult brain and behavior. You want somebody that's an expert in that field of child behavior. So you want to make sure you get referrals. And if you go to a doctor and you do not like that doctor, that vibe is just not there. Or you don't like the fact that they don't allow you to go in the back, or you can't see a glass, through a glass. I remember there was a doctor's office we went to, and, the girls were going back in the back. They were little bitty girls. I didn't feel comfortable with that situation. So that wasn't a doctor for them. Do not feel like you got to, participate with something that you're not comfortable with. I don't care what kind of degree that they have behind their name. If you don't feel comfortable with that doctor's office and the method, you ask them kindly, can I sit in on the session? I give you my word. I will not interject. Or is there some way you can leave your door open and I can sit in the room next to? I understand that you have your HIPAA laws and all of that, but I need to feel secure with my child in that closed room with you. And if they're not willing to accommodate you on some kind of level, then that's not the doctor's office that your child needs to go to, because doctors can be perverts too. So especially if you have a child that is not articulating, that's the reason why you need to be an advocate also for your child in the school system. Most children, a lot of children who do not articulate themselves well and are in these special ed classes or riding these buses, there are a lot of perverts hiding. So you need to be able to advocate. You need to be able to get your child the best medical help that they can get so that you can get them on the road to a healthier them that they are. And you want to make sure that you become aware of certain words, languages that are being used in the school. When you go to these meetings, you want to hold the counselors, the teachers accountable. You want them to come up with a plan. You want them to, let you know when your child is having certain behaviors. When did it start? So if your child was good in school, the first 3 weeks of school, and then right about the fourth week in school, little Mikey started acting out, started spitting and biting people. Well, then you want to go in and you want to ask them, ask for a functional behavior assessment. And that's where the school collects data and behavior for a couple of weeks or so, and then they're able to come back and assess it and to figure out what triggered it, and so that you all can come together with a new plan, because just because we have a plan, that does not mean that behavior or certain things in their special needs won't happen to change from time to time according to the situations that occur in their day-to-day activities. And I encourage parents, if you know that your children have some kind of mental health or disability, special needs or whatever, make sure that you start their mornings off right. If they're not morning kids, don't ruffle their feathers. Find some kind of way to bring some kind of joy to them in the morning so that you can let them leave out of your house in the best attitude, most positive attitude as possible, because you must realize you're sending your children off to strangers who have their own personal issues and who do not have to be compassionate or sympathetic to your child's needs. I always try to make sure that before my grandchildren get out of the car in the morning, we have a positive attitude. We are in the greatest of great spirits. And I have each and every one of my grandchildren's teachers' cell phone numbers. We have the dojo where I can communicate through the school system, emailing. It's like text messaging. I can text them by their cell phones, or I can communicate through the phone, the school's email, whatever the case may be. But I have access to their teachers all day long. And 9 times out of 10, whether I've gotten so comfortable with my grandchildren's teachers because they're really good about reporting in day-to-day activity. 9 times out of 10, they'll text me before I text them. They'll say, hey, we're having an awesome day. I guess the morning affirmations went well this morning, da-da-da-da-da-da. Every day I'm going to look, I have something on my text from my phone or from the school's email system from their teachers letting me know a day-to-day data information of what's going on with, my grand's behavior or attitude or their academics, some sort of paper trail. And I always, if it's something, a time span goal, I'm usually out there to the kids' school a couple of days out of the week because I volunteer at, several of the schools here. But I try to make sure I pop in their classroom to say, hey, let them know that I'm there. And I tell you, if you all can ever get the opportunity to volunteer, even for those of you that work full schedules, volunteer to assist on the nights or the evenings that their schools are having special events. You go and volunteer, you will see your child's morale increase, because children whose parents or grandparents are active in their school lives and activities, they have a higher self-esteem and academically excel better than kids whose parents are not involved. And that's not in all cases, because we know that there's a lot of parents who do not get a chance to do that. But I'm saying for children who would potentially have some kind of behavioral problem. So, volunteer wherever you can. I don't want to overload you guys on information, but I do want to stress to you, don't just call little Mikey bad. Try to find out what's going on. take him to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a psychotherapist, or a neuropsychologist, so that you can find out and understand your child better. And when you understand that they do have a diagnosis, don't be ashamed of that diagnosis. If your child can't help their diagnosis, then why are you ashamed of their diagnosis? That's not something that you can change. But what you can do is make the productivity of their life the best that you can by beginning to shape their world. And I will say this, and then I'm going to allow for questions of any sort. But our 9-year-old was diagnosed with Asperger's when she was 3, and she had an IQ of 135 at 3, but she was not functioning normally as what we would say was normal. She would run and bang her head into the wall, concrete floors. But we had to find out what worked for her. And so we found out at 3 years old, her brain was bored, and she was so bored. So one day she hopped on the computer, and she began to just excel. She began to just excel on the computer, and she began to teach herself. At 18 months, she began to teach herself on a Mac computer. And then by the time she was 3 years old, I could no longer homeschool her. She was homeschooling herself. So she was doing literally 10 and 11 and 12 hours a day of homeschooling herself. She didn't want to stop learning. And that's what began to stimulate her. And with love and with patience, we began to, when she would have those meltdowns, I would be so embarrassed out in public. And my nerves would be a wreck. So when you see people out in public and their kids are having meltdowns, you don't really know the dynamics of that family. Don't look at that mother like she needs to beat that child. Don't look in disgust. You really don't know what's going on. And every time you looking at that mother in disgust, it's causing her to have anxiety. And that's how a lot of children end up getting abused, because parents are so stressed out. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. They're not getting the help that they need to get. So don't be a part of the problem, but allow them to do what they need to do. And I can tell you right now, my granddaughter, no one, not even the doctors, can ever tell that she was ever diagnosed with any disorders of any sort. She was diagnosed with autism, and she was diagnosed with descriptive language disorder. She is gifted. She is excelling wonderfully well. She's in sports doing very well. Same with her sister. When we got her sister was 2, turning 3. Her sister just turned 7. Last year they was calling me every day. We had to find a plan that worked for her, and now this year she's leading in her class, turned completely around. So there is hope. You just gotta love your child to life and get them the help that they need, and be willing to be that village. The last thing, I know I said the other thing was the last thing, but the last thing is, a lot of the schools do not want your children to get, especially minorities, they do not want these kids to get IEPs because they know that they automatically qualify for disability. So if you know that your child has some form of something going on with them, fight for them to get their diagnosis so that they can get their IEP or their 504, so that they can get their disability money, not so that we can live off of their monies, but so that we can get them the help that they need, and it won't be a financial struggle to us. Uncle Frank, if you want to open up for questions, if I can answer them, I will, and if I can't, I'll make sure that I leave the number so that they can get with me, and I'll get the answer to them.